Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 with Broadcasting Scotland, and tonight I'm hosting the programme from the comfort of my home because I've had an old back injury flare up, so I wasn't able to get into the studio, so please forgive me for the fact that we're doing it from the comfort of my home. I'm quite happy with that because I've got a nice comfy couch to sit on. So we'll start off with the coronavirus update for today. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,575,220 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,393,929 were confirmed negative. 181,291 have tested positive. There are 758 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. This will be an underestimate as the number of cases, not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 69 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 6,181. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,939 were in hospital last night, 143 of whom were intensive care. 610,778 people have now received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccination and 8,345 have received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures published today show 108,013 patients who have tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 1,449 since yesterday. This number refers to the deaths in all settings and not just the hospitals. And as always, our condolences to family and friends who have lost loved ones. Now for the ONS update. The percentage of people testing positive for the coronavirus in England remains high despite a small decrease in recent weeks. It is estimated that 1 in 55 people in England had COVID-19 the week ending the 23rd of January 2021. In the week ending 24th of January, hospital admission rates decreased slightly to 33.5%. Per 101,000 people. Sorry, my apologies, getting that number wrong. The number of registered deaths involved with COVID-19 in England and Wales have increased the week ending the 22nd of January. Over 45% deaths recorded that week involved COVID-19. This is the highest proportion since the start of the pandemic. There were 8,422 deaths where COVID was mentioned on the death certificate in the week ending the 22nd of January 2021. This is a 16.2% increase from the previous week, with deaths involving COVID-19 accounting for nearly half, which is 45.1% of all deaths in England and Wales. This is the highest proportion since the start of the pandemic. The total number of deaths was registered at 41.3% higher than the 5-year average. There is a period of time between a person becoming infected with COVID-19 and being admitted to the hospital or dying because of it. This means there will be a delay between a change in infection levels and corresponding changes in the number of hospital admissions and deaths. Now to the first story of the evening, which is new measures to tackle coronavirus. A series of new measures aimed at driving down coronavirus rates in Scotland have been announced. Current restrictions include the stay-at-home requirement are set to remain in place until at least the end of February, and schools will continue to be closed to most children until the rest of the month. Nurseries and primaries 1 to primary 3 are, however, now scheduled to return full-time on the 22nd of February, subject to the final confirmation 2 weeks from now that sufficient progress in tackling the virus has been achieved. In an update to Parliament, the First Minister confirmed that a managed quarantine system for anyone who arrives directly into Scotland, regardless of which country they have came from, will be introduced as soon as practically possible. In addition to guarding against the increase in importation of new cases, access to testing to find cases and interrupt transmission already taking place in Scotland will be stepped up. This includes, from the middle of February, routine testing of healthcare workers to be expanded to cover patient-facing primary care workers such as GPs, dentists, optimists and pharmacists, as well as all patient-facing staff who work in hospices. From later this month, regular testing will be offered to support the return to schools and nurseries. Senior phase secondary school students and all staff in primary, secondary and special needs schools, including school-based early learning centre staff, will be able to benefit from routine at-home testing 2 times a week. Certain workplaces where there's a risk of transmission is greater and which provide essential or critical services such as those within the food processing and distribution sectors, and staff within emergency service control rooms will also be supported to introduce routine workforce testing. Targeted community testing will continue to be expanded so that testing is available to people locally regardless of whether or not they have any symptoms. From mid-February, tests will also be offered to all those close contacts of people who have tested positive for COVID, enabling test and protect teams to identify their contacts and track and break further chains of transmission. In order to promote people's ability to self-isolate where necessary, financial support will be significantly expanded to include all workers earning the real living wage or less, as well as those in receipt of a council tax reduction because of low income. The £500 self-isolation support grant will also be extended to those people who cannot work because someone they have caring responsibilities is asked to self-isolate. Now for the next story, more people supported to self-isolate, which runs on from the previous story. The £500 self-isolation support grant is being significantly extended to more people on low incomes. The grant will be available to workers earning the real living wage or less, as well as those in receipt of a council tax reduction because of low income. People with caring responsibilities with someone over 16 who is asked to self-isolate where the carer themselves meet the other eligibility criteria can also get the grant. In addition, the Scottish Government is lengthening the period during which people apply for the self-isolation support grant. They will now be able to apply within 28 days of being told to self-isolate. The changes will take effect from the 16th of February to allow local authorities time to change their systems and application forms, but eligibility will be backdated to the 2nd of February. This means an additional 200,000 people will be eligible for the grant if they are asked to self-isolate. Now, Johnson making the same mistakes over again on border controls. The SNP has said Boris Johnson is making the same mistakes over again by failing to introduce tough border controls to tackle COVID-19. It comes as the Times reports the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergency, i.e. SAGE, had said geographically targeted travel bans were not enough to stop new coronavirus strains from arriving in the country. And the only way to get close to stopping them was to close the borders completely or introduce mandatory hotel quarantine measures for everyone entering the UK. The SNP has repeatedly called for tougher border controls to tackle COVID-19 since last spring. But the UK government has ignored these calls calls and failed to respond adequately, allowing millions of arrivals into the UK since the start of the pandemic without travel bans or proper health and quarantine measures. Last night, Douglas Ross and all six Scottish Tory MPs allowed Boris Johnson's orders and abstained on a vote in Parliament on COVID security at the border. In the past few months, Scottish Tory MPs have also voted against free school meals, abstained on cuts to universal credit, abstained on workers' rights, abstained on trade ban for countries committing genocide, and voted for Boris Johnson's damaging hard Brexit. Right, phased school return for some pupils. Some pupils will be happy about this, I suppose. Children in early learning and childcare and in primaries 1 to 3 are now scheduled to make a full return to nurseries and schools from the 22nd of February. In addition, very limited numbers of pupils in secondary S4 and S2, S6 will also be able to complete in-school practical work that is essential for completing national qualifications on a part-time basis from the same date. Some children and young people with significant additional support needs will also be prioritised for a return to in-person provision for those most urgently in need of support. Other pupils, with the exception of vulnerable children and those of key workers, will continue with remote learning. To complement the return to in-school teaching, there will be a significant expansion of testing. People who work in schools, early learning and childcare settings attached to schools and senior phase pupils will be offered at-home testing 2 times a week. 2-metre physical distancing for adults and pupils will be required in secondary schools in the period immediately after return. Where required, update guidance and associated mitigations will be published for all relevant settings that allows for the current circumstances and the latest scientific advice. All these measures will be kept under regular review. These decisions will be confirmed on Tuesday, the 16th of February, providing sufficient progress in tackling the virus has been made. Now, the judge considers the judge has made a decision regarding jail for Navalny. The judge in the hearing against the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has opposed a 2.5-year sentence. Now, Navalny, one of Putin's most prominent critics, was arrested at the Russian border on January the 17th for alleged parole violations after returning from Germany, where had been recovering from being poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent. Navalny said Russian state security agents had put the poison in his underpants, something the Kremlin has denied. It has been suggested that Navalny is a CIA asset, a charge he rejects, and has told the West to stay out of its domestic affairs. A serious jail term for Navalny after 2 consecutive weekends of nationwide protests calling for his freedom would strain already poor ties with the West, which would be likely to consider imposing sanctions on Moscow over the case. Today's hearing was ostensibly about Navalny's alleged parole violations over a suspended sentence in an old embezzlement case which Navalny says was trumped up. But Navalny, in a fiery final speech to the court, alleged the real reason he was jailed was Putin's fear of him as a political rival, a suggestion the Kremlin has laughed off, referring to Navalny as a troublesome blogger with no wide popular support. Someone did not want me to take a single step on my country's territory as a free man. And we know who and we know why. The hatred and fear of one man living in a bunker whom I offended by surviving when he tried to have me killed, Navalny told the court from inside a glass cage. Outside the court, reporters saw riot police detained around 60 of Navalny's supporters who had gathered to offer their support. The OVD Info Monitoring Group has reported 311 arrests. Now, the US, now to go across the water to the US, the US Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez wants Republicans held to account for the 6th of January attack. Now, the Democratic representative, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has described being terrified for her life during the storming of the US Capitol in an emotional broadcast on Monday night, doubling down on calls for Republican politicians to be held accountable. The New York House member, Ocasio-Cortez, said she was harassed by those she identified as fans of former President Donald Trump for days before the January the 6th incident, and warned by other members of Congress to be careful on the day of the rally. That day, Ocasio-Cortez said on an Instagram live broadcast she hid behind a bathroom door in her office, fearing for her life. She evacuated with a staffer to another building and added, and scrambled to get into a colleague's office where she hid for hours. The Congresswoman equated Republican calls to move on from the incident, which 5 died and dozens of police were injured, to other forms of abuse. The reason I'm getting emotional in this moment is because these folks who tell us to move on, that is not a big deal and that we should forget what happened, or even telling us to apologise, these are the same tactics of abusers, she said. And I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I haven't told many people that in my life. Several congressional committees are investigating the security failures behind the attacks. Ocasio-Cortez, known to her fans as AOC, is among the Democrats calling for Republicans to encourage and repeated Trump's lie that he had won the November the 3rd presidential election to resign. Now for back home. More help with free personal and nursing care. Adults who pay for their residential care in Scotland will be better off from April as a result of a change to the rates of allowances they receive for personal and nursing care. Those who self-fund their residential care receive an allowance in recognition of their personal and nursing care costs. Regulations laid in Parliament will raise these allowances by 7.5%, well above the normal annual increase, in recognition of the increasing cost of providing care, particularly for people with dementia. The change is backed by an additional £10.1 million in local authority funding to cover the increases. Now, Scotland's carbon footprint. Scotland's chief statistician today published Scotland's carbon footprint from 1998 to 2017. This publication provides estimates of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions on consumption basis. That is, emissions that are associated with the spending of Scottish residents on goods and services, wherever in the world these emissions arise, together with emissions directly generated by Scottish households. The key points are, between 2016 and 2017, Scotland's carbon footprint emissions from all greenhouse gases decreased by 3.5% to a record low of 70.7 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. Between 1998 and 2017, Scotland's carbon footprint fell by 21.1%, and from 89.6 mtCO2e in 1998 to 70.7 mtCO2e in 2007. And Scotland's carbon footprint rose from 1999 onwards to a peak of 101.1 mtCO2e in 2007 before falling sharply in the following years, coinciding with the recession, and has generally fallen gradually in recent years. The overall reduction between this 2007 peak and 2017 is 30%. Now, back over across the water, Groundhog Day. Pennsylvania's famous groundhog emerged from his tree stump on Tuesday to predict another 6 weeks of winter, just as the northeastern United States got blanketed with its second day of snow. After a year-long pandemic in which every day seemed like the one before, not unlike the 1993 movie Groundhog Day, Pennsylvanian Phil emerged at dawn, saw his thanks to Tawny Phil, that is a tongue twister, emerged at dawn and saw his shadow and decided to wait it out another 6 weeks, his handler said. Now, when I turn to see, there is a perfect shadow cast upon me. 6 more weeks of winter they will be, said Jeff Lundy, the president of Tawny Groundhog Club, the Groundhog's official interpreter. Crikey, that is a tongue twister. Every February the 2nd, known as Groundhog Day, which feels very much, I must say, like Groundhog Day every day at the moment. But the club's annual ritual this year is in Punxsutawneyville, Pennsylvania, about 75 miles, 121 kilometres northeast of Pittsburgh, was different than the 134 that came before, because of the 1,000 spectators that usually attend were replaced by cardboard cutouts. Well, I must say, the groundhog has got a lot of sense just to go back in for another 6 weeks. Right, now for the next story. Failure to act on whisky tariffs cost industry $500 million. Following reports that losses to Scotch whisky reports have reached £500 million following the US tariffs. The SNP has condemned the Tory government for yet another broken promise. The UK government's failure to settle the issues forms part of a growing list of broken promises made in Scotland and adds to the devastation its decisions have caused for Scotland's key industries, including fishing and agriculture. Commenting, Argyll and Bute SNP MP and chair of Westminster's APPG on whisky, Brendan O'Hara said, "The losses of the Scotch whisky exports are eye-watering and simply unsustainable for this vital, important industry. For over a year, the Tories have assured us that finding a solution to the crisis was top priority. Their strategy of pandering to the disgraced Trump administration, however, entirely failed to deliver any resolution to this damaging dispute, proving that Tories' promises to Scotch whisky industry ring just as hollow as the promises they made to the Scotland's fishing and agricultural sectors. Scotch whisky plays a crucial role in the success of our global food and drink sector and our economy, but has been dealt a triple whammy with the economic impacts of tariffs, Brexit and the pandemic." Now for the final story of the evening. Pressure grows on the Chancellor to maintain universal credit uplift. Following a new report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation that shows the worst of the unemployment crisis is still to come. In the UK, the SNP has renewed calls for the £20 boost to universal credit to be made permanent and extended to the legacy benefits. The report states that losing the uplift while the job market remains in crisis will accelerate debt and rising destitution, taking away this uplift, which has been described as a lifeline, in the middle of a global health pandemic, will cut incomes by £1,040 per year for 6.2 million families, resulting in 500,000 more people being pulled into poverty, including 200,000 children. The SNP has said that anything less than making the uplift permanent and extending it to legacy benefits will be another missed opportunity by the UK government to tackle poverty. The report comes after figures reveal that although the unemployment rate in Scotland has decreased, UK unemployment as a whole has risen again to 5%, with the redundancies set at a record high. Well, that's me for this evening with today's stories, and thank you for joining me, and I hope you will join us again tomorrow. Gordon will be back in the hot seat. But however, in the meantime, as always, please support us here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you can, I know times are financially tough for everybody. Subscribe. £5 a month would be amazing. If not, then just share our broadcasts, and you can go onto our website if you can see it here. And you can register your support, and as I say, you can also share our broadcasts as well. Another way you could help us is by volunteering and helping us out. We are always on the lookout for volunteers, whether it's for presenting the shows or for behind the scenes. And there is lots of volunteer jobs available, and it's a good way to, at the moment with the pandemic, a lot of it can be done at home. You don't need to be in the studio, so it doesn't matter whereabouts in Scotland you are. And also as well, it helps to beef up your CV a wee bit, which is quite nice as well. So in the meantime, thank you very much for joining me. A wee bit different coming from my home, and I hope you all look after yourself and take care. And thank you once again for joining us here at Scotland at 7.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.